What's up? It's Matt, Friday edition restaurant expert roundup in New York. We'll be back in a second. That was my best Jay-Z impression in New York. But you're in New Jersey technically, right?
We're a mile from Manhattan. We're in Jersey City, right through the Holland Tunnel. But that's right.
So
And
Stephen,
that's Alicia Keys that you were doing your best to butcher. But anyway, yeah, no, we're in Jersey City, about a mile from New York.
Okay, Stephen, tell everybody who you are and your business and your podcast, and let's dig into it.
You got it, Matt. So my name is Stephen Toboroff. I'm the CEO of Woolco Foods. We are a broadline distributor that sells restaurants, hotels, caterers, institutions in New York City, suburbs of New York, and all throughout New Jersey. And I've been doing this since 1999. We've been in business since 1987. And the podcast is called The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. It drops on Tuesdays. I think we're up to episode 62 right about now. And very good to be with you again, Matt.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. I mean, you're a little different world than I am, being that, New York, especially during the pandemic, was a much different world than Kentucky and Cincinnati, Ohio. But I'm glad to hear that things are opening up. You said that it's a different world right now in New York than it was a couple years ago, right?
Well, it's most assuredly a different world than it was a couple years ago. 2020, I think you and I last spoke sometime last year, but
Yep.
Obviously 2020 was extremely challenging. Things began to really move in a very noticeable and appreciable direction in 2021. There was a little bit of a hiccup for about 6 or 7 weeks at the end of last year, beginning of this year. But going into 22, New York really is getting its mojo back in many, many ways. I mean, the city is very busy. Tourism's coming back. I would say that while tourism is certainly not where it was, pre-pandemic, It's getting there every day. The office workers are coming back. That's quite, and we could get into that if you want. I don't know how impactful that is for the entire hospitality sector. And the new mayor, not to be political, but just as a sort of a business observation, the new mayor is about as pro-hospitality, pro-restaurant industry as anyone we've ever had. He's all about the nightlife, the restaurants, and making New York a destination spot. So it's a totally different energy and vibe than it's been for a long time.
Yeah, and that's great, because that's a lot of times you talk about a city like New York, there's so many different avenues. You got tourism, you've got people that live there, but then you've also, like you said, you've got the mass amounts of people that work there. Where I'm at here in Northern Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, even during the shutdown, a lot of restaurants still had the same opportunity, because like where I'm at my office in Florence, there's not high rises everywhere. It's 1 or 2 story buildings, and, it's suburbia, and we don't have tourism to worry about. And we don't have the downtown part where I'm at, but we've got some similar elements. But New York, you got hit with every angle. And I would also say you got hit because you had a mayor, not to get political, but you did have a mayor, probably one of the 5 or 10 in the country, that was the strictest on everything. I mean, I don't think you could look at somebody. Like, if they're eating a sandwich, don't look at them.
No, it's true. He was, even pre-pandemic, he was rather hostile to business in general. But you're correct. It was an extraordinarily challenging environment for several months there. New Yorkers, as always, were resilient and made the most of it. And we did everything we could to support them, and it was an incredible experience. It was a learning experience. Certainly we've come out better because of it, but it was absolutely challenging. And, you're correct. There was a lot of different dynamics at play in the New York City hospitality scene. And some of those were, dramatically impacted. And now they're sort of come back 180 degrees in the other direction. So, it's very exciting.
So a lot of your restaurants up there, how are they adjusting to it? Is there workforce issues as much as there are around the country in New York? Because when you got all these people that are pent up demand of consumers, I saw that in a lot of places, pent up demand, and especially in New York, to run and actually get to enjoy what the city's built around entertainment, food, nightlife.
Yep.
All of a sudden, then you got tourists coming. Is there a lot of issues with workforce and labor in that area?
Well, what I would say is, sort of a lead into that question, there were a number of legislative or executive orders that were issued in 2020 that have actually been quite positive for the industry. So one of them was the outdoor dining and making that permanent. New
Oh,
York was never really a cafe city in the way that Vienna or Paris was. You did have a lot of establishments that had outdoor dining, and it was there, but they really took it to a whole other level as a way to sort of support the industry. And so that's something that's lasted, and that's been a huge force multiplier for restaurants that can avail themselves of it. Same thing in Jersey City and Hoboken. I mean, it's just been insane. And the answer to your question directly, Matt, is there's absolutely been issues finding people. I think those issues have become less acute, let's say now versus where they were in Q3 or Q4 last year. But there's no difficulty in getting a job in the hospitality industry if you're a chef, if you're a server, if you're front of the house, back of the house, whatever it is. It's very much an industry that's in demand right now.
yeah.
I think that most of our customers have been able to navigate it. But like I say, I think it's a great time to go into that line of work if it's been one of your passions, because absolutely the demand is there for people.
And what you said there is huge. Is it great time to go into that line of work? I mean, think about the opportunity for somebody that's young and hungry to come into an independent brand or a franchise or whatever and make your mark and climb the ladder. I was listening to a podcast the other day. His name's Ryan Serhant. I don't know if you've seen him before. He's a realtor in New
Sure,
York. And he
sure.
was talking about, for years, New York was very tough to sell in because it was high prices, massive demand. And he said the greatest part about the pandemic for him was that New York went on sale, that there was a lot of real estate available. And he's like, for the first time in his career, there was a lot of things to sell in New York. So he was excited about it. And I kind of think about that with what you said there, is that if I'm somebody in that region and I'm looking, okay, I want to make my stamp, I want to build a career, there's no better time than right now than to do that in the hospitality space.
No doubt about that. And connected to that, Matt, I did an interview with a very prominent attorney who represents the restaurant industry, Jasmine Moy, in
Okay.
sort of the depths of 2020. And I shared with her my thought that on the other end of this, you're going to see maybe a once in a 30, 40-year opportunity for those restaurant owners and operators that want to expand to be able to access space at a more affordable rate than they were before. This happened to a large extent in 2009 after the credit crisis. Those restaurants that were financially sound with great concepts and great customer bases, they were able to renegotiate leases. They were able to get new leases. They were able to get the space next door and break through. And what's happened is now, because of a lot of secular changes and other aspects of the economy, restaurants and hospitality spaces are desirable tenants because it's one of the hottest industries right now. And the reality is, Matt, that those bargains that may have been there, I don't think they're there anymore. The absorption rate for commercial real estate that can be either utilized immediately or converted into a hospitality space has been all taken. And if you check out Eater New York, they have Eater for every city. You'll see there's new restaurants opening. I've never seen this in my career. So many new restaurants and speakeasies and bakeries opening up one after the other because those openings were put on hold. And then people that, did well, people that have the loyal customer base, they got aggressive very quickly. So you're exactly right from the perspective of somebody who wants to work in this industry and align themselves with an up and coming brand or align themselves as a sous chef in a great kitchen. It's an absolutely phenomenal time.
What are some other things that have you excited right now about the restaurant space?
I would say the thing that's got me really excited about the restaurant space in general, because we have a lot of customers in New York and New Jersey, as well as New York, is one, I think the level of interconnectedness between the operators and the customers and us as vendors is as strong as it's ever been. Because when you go through a challenging situation with people, you form a bond
Yep.
that is so significant and meaningful, and it lasts. And so the bonds that were formed between restaurants and their customers, restaurants and their vendors, it really changed the dynamic and made it that much more human, even though we're in the hospitality industry. And some people thought that that trend would just dissipate and people would go back to their normal way of being. And I haven't found that to be the case. So that's the first thing I'm excited for. And the second thing I'm excited for, and this happens in other periods of time, it happened in 2009, it happens in other slowdowns. You're seeing so many different innovative menus and concepts come to the market, but they're all leading with a quality of food first or a quality of cocktail first. There have been periods of time in New York City's history where the ambiance of a restaurant or the scene associated with it was
Yeah.
the ultimate selling point. And certainly those dynamics are crucial. But now the people that are coming into this space, they really want to make their mark on the quality of their menu offerings, the quality of their cocktails, and having that connection with their customers. And it's just very exciting because that dynamic can go on and on and on. There's no end to that trend. That's not hype. That's a real fundamental component of what we do in this business. So just,
Yeah.
very exciting on those levels.
And I've seen that personally in a couple of places. Cincinnati here, we have with the OTR, over the Rhine area, that for many years was the trendy place to be. And I used to always joke that even if you had a crappy restaurant in OTR, because it was in OTR, because it was positioned in a certain spot, you could have average food and still have a line. And that's what happened. And it used to crack me up because I would watch these things. And there's certain restaurants downtown in OTR, like the Eagles, that go-to for me, that just crushes it. They hit a 10 out of 10 on every scale in the restaurant. But you go a couple doors down, there's a restaurant that's got the exact same customer count in the restaurant. They're only there because the other places are full. And they're like, we'll go here tonight. And it's an average product. And I've seen it in San Diego, a place I've become familiar with, staying in the gas lamp district out there. Same thing. It's a hot place. People are there and you can suck and do decent. But I'm glad to see what you're saying is that there's a lot of places that are leading with product, leading with service versus leaning on the location.
And also because of the way New York is, most neighborhoods, and this is true for Jersey City, Hoboken, the suburbs of New Jersey, a lot of these neighborhoods are established. So when you're getting, if you want to call it buzz about restaurants, it's really about those fundamental things, which is the great food, the great cocktails, the great experience you have going there. And so that always leads to people opening up restaurants in new markets that they weren't in before. And that's another great thing about New York City, where you'll see gastropubs opening up in neighborhoods where 10 or 15 years ago that would have been, inconceivable. So it really is a very cool time. It leads to a lot of positive evolution in the space all around.
And going back to your original point you made there also, and it's ironic because I'm going to experience it this weekend, is this next Saturday, I'm doing a Tough Mudder. It's a half marathon, off-road, obstacles, climbing crap, going through mud. They beat the crap out of you. It's about a 3 to 4 hour journey typically. And I've got myself and 4 of our employees going. And my goal is to get more of us going. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it with people on our team was I'm a strong believer that when you go through something like that, it builds camaraderie. It builds teamwork. It builds different relationships that make you appreciate people at a different reason when you're back doing the grind 9 to 5. And I agree with what you said with the restaurants. I think a lot of consumers kind of felt like they were in the trenches with a lot of these restaurants during that time. I mean, Barleycorns is a restaurant down the street I eat at pretty much every week. We went there. I knew the Hiles owned it. I'm like, hey, I want to support them. They don't have dine-in. I'm going to eat in my car. And we ate Dock-style wings and Saratoga chips in the car every week for probably 4 months when they didn't have dine-in open. And, that created for me now, even more than beforehand, more of a bond to support a local business. And I think that's a huge element that can't be overlooked. And I don't think it went away either. I see a lot of people that are more loyal than ever to those brands that they ran with during the pandemic.
Absolutely. And it's the same with me and my customers. The conversations we had, the different experiences we went through, it just makes the whole connection that much more significant. And I think it's just a very positive thing all around. And certainly from the perspective of the restaurants, it gives them a much more meaningful way to interact with their customers. And I think for the customers going out, it becomes a much more significant and meaningful experience to go to their local place or even somewhere new. So I completely agree with you.
So something that's got me a little excited that I'm hoping carries on is that restaurants woke up a little to technology and to this device that we hold in our hand that looks like you're on an iPhone, probably, right?
I am. I'm on a Samsung. Yep.
Yeah, Samsung. So you're on a smartphone. And one thing that really disappointed me the most before the pandemic hit was the fact that restaurants, in my opinion, were 20 years behind on tech and marketing. That my background in the 90s was radio and TV and you had to buy whatever you had, whatever marketing was out there, your company spent money on to get it. And you didn't have any control over the platform it was on. You bought a radio commercial on this radio station. It happened. Good deal. Nowadays, you've got TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And there's countless other places that you can be on for free. And when the pandemic hit, I saw a lot of the restaurants that I always kind of talked about, man, they aren't leveraging social media. They aren't leveraging these free platforms. Now all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, we need to communicate with people. Let's get on Facebook more often. Let's get on Instagram. Let's do live video. Have you seen a lot of your restaurant clients taking more advantage of the digital revolution, I guess you could say, the smartphone, than they were before the pandemic?
I have, and it's interesting you say what you said, Matt, because in my upcoming episode of the Profitable Table on Tuesday, I go into that as well. And it's something I've even talked to my salespeople about. But to answer your question directly, I think they absolutely have. And the smart ones are the ones that are not over focusing on staged photos of their meals. They're creating and just displaying authentic moments within their restaurant. I do think people are getting it. And one of the things that I emphasized in my podcast was we now have a mayor in New York that is really pushing the reopening of New York and getting tourism back and everything. If you can just educate yourself a little bit on how to use, let's just take Instagram as an example. I think a misconception a lot of people have is they figure the way Instagram works from a business standpoint is you post, you do everything you can to accumulate likes. People are going to be so impressed with your impressions that they're going to come to your restaurant. That's just a small piece of it. If you can use some of the tools on Instagram, you can be sending impressions to markets in Dublin, in Portugal, in any market you want to go to, so that when tourists from that area come to New York, they have some knowledge. And you're absolutely correct. There's no intermediary. There's no cost to it. You know, you don't necessarily need to do paid ads. You can, if you know what you're doing, to get people to help you. But so I completely agree with you there. And it's something I've been focusing with my sales team on. I'm like, guys, those of you that have not established a really credible, attractive, clearly understood social media presence that would enable you to DM a restaurant that you want to have a meeting with, or comment on an impression and form an exchange, you're depriving yourself of an incredibly efficient and inexpensive and, as I say, efficacious tool. So you're 100% right. I do see people getting the hang of it. The ones that seem to really get it, as I said before, the ones that are not being overly staged, but are just representing their spot. And I think it's absolutely going to continue, because I think people who didn't understand it now. I think those who have been late to it are seeing what their peers and competitors are doing, and they're just going to evolve and jump on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the opportunity. Like I said, in the 90s, when I sold radio advertising, if you were Ferrari's Little Italy in Madeira, Ohio, who was a client of mine, there was nothing free out there. And you could maybe go hold a sign on Montgomery Road saying your restaurant's right here. You still got a cost of manpower there, but you didn't have all this stuff. And if you look now, it's amazing. I mean, I was on a Clubhouse call today with Sean Walchef. He holds a Eastern time, 1 p.m. on Wednesday and Fridays. You got to join it. I think you'd enjoy the conversation, and it's all about hospitality. But I mean, it's free. All of it's free. Facebook, Instagram. And the part I love is assuming you don't do inappropriate stuff, which most restaurants aren't going to. If you just use the medium, it's huge. And the big thing I've noticed more and more, and we've been preaching to our clients. And by the way, shameless plug, Sean and I have a new podcast coming out June 22nd called Own Their Phones. He's an independent restaurant owner. We help independent restaurants. And so we're chronicling our journey of us helping his company do what we do, attract, build, and retain customers. But on the podcast, we talk about digital storytelling from a standpoint that, radio and TV advertising is advertising. Facebook, Instagram is engagement. It's conversation. Yeah. And I was showing an example recently to a pizza restaurant, and he's like, Matt, what do you think is our best opportunity to win? And I said, well, let me show you an example of what not to do. I said, you've heard of Papa John's? He's like, yeah. I pulled up Papa John's Facebook page, 6.7 million followers. I then said, I'm going to show you a pizza place up in Minnesota called Basilio's that we've worked with a couple of years. And Connie and Tom listen. Like they'll call up and say, Matt, how can we better use Facebook or Instagram? I'll say, I want you to do I want you to do a video on this. Like one day she was telling me that they open the restaurant up occasionally when traveling hockey teams come through where they're at in Minnesota. And they'll have these hockey teams come in and eat. I said, chronicle that. Tell that story. Show that hockey team. They won the state championship. Talk about it. So they started doing it. And so I was doing this example, and it's kind of funny. It worked out how it did. I told the guys, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pull my screen up. We're going to look at Papa John's and Basilio's. I said, now Papa John's has 6.7 million followers. Basilio's has 4,700. So it's like 1,400 times more, right? So we should be able to take Papa John's engagement and divide it by 1,400, and we'll see how they compare with Basilio's. Here's the funny thing. Basilio's engagement beats them head on. Basilio's is getting like 100 to 150 engagements, comments, shares, likes on these posts. Papa John's is getting 100 to 150. And think about that for a minute. 6.7 million people are in essence ignoring what Papa John's is putting on Facebook. And when I went through and analyzed it, it's because since day one, and they probably can't, they probably could if they got creative. There's no reason the CEO can't do the pizza CEO and go live all the time and tell stories. But they just repurpose their TV advertising on Facebook and on Instagram. And nobody engages because Facebook, like you said, you can advertise on these mediums. When you advertise and post advertising content, Facebook wants you to pay. When you post organic content, they put it up there. And so like, here's an example. If you want to look up a restaurant that's pivoted the past couple months, is a restaurant called Hickory Jack's in California. And he called us up a while back, and he's a friend of ours and a client. And he asked what he could do better. And I said, get on content, get on lives. And like, so he started putting a lot of reels up, a lot of posts. And just to put this in perspective, so one location, small guy. And if I go back, he's now done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He's done 33 videos in about 6 weeks. And they're him. Like Smart. This is him on camera. And I said, hey, people want to know who Hickory Jack is. Even though his name's John, not Jack, different story. But I'm like, hey, tell him you're Hickory Jack. You own the damn place. People want to have a friend. They want to say, I know the owner. And these videos are great because it's, like you said, it's not staged. And like that one, 494 views, 562, 1,400, 545, 370, 867, 800. He's literally got probably 5,000 views in the past 2 weeks that he wouldn't have gotten if he not taken the effort. And he also wouldn't have gotten had he did staged crap. Like I've got 5 professional video cameras on the other room over there that my guys know how to do all that fancy stuff that you can do that works, but it works better when it's on a phone and it's organic because customers want to see what that barbecue looks like, all natural.
100%. And another point you make, which I'm constantly reinforcing in my sales team and also my customers when I speak to them, when you're using, there's some people, and this is fine. There are some people who want to use social media to take pictures of sunsets or show themselves on vacation or show their car or do all that stuff. And then they want to get likes. And, it's something that is of value to them. That's fine. That's not what I'm looking at. And I don't think that's what you're talking about either. As a business tool, what you want is not to accumulate likes, but to create a presence on someone's phone that leads them to engage with you. Because let's just make it as transactional as possible. I'll use myself for an example. If one person listens to my podcast because I've interviewed, let's say, Ron Ben Israel or you or Jason Burchard of Viselk or whomever, and they say, wow, Jason Burchard, I know him very well. I respect the food. I haven't heard of Woolco. Let me Google them. Oh, wow, this is interesting. You know what? I'm interested. And then they set up a meeting and they become a client that does $10,000 a week in business. There's $500,000 of revenue generated by that podcast. So the point being, you can't look at it purely from accumulating likes. You want to be involved in engagement, as you say, and you want to be authentic in what you're representing because we didn't even get into referrals. So that's what people need to understand about social media. It's a magnificent, it's an elegant, it's a beautiful tool that can be used at no cost. And as you said, that's when them engaging with you. What about if you go out and engage with whomever you want to engage with? Yep. Well, now you have a page set up. It reflects who you are, what you're about. Now, when you reach out to someone, it's much friendlier, less offensive, less sort of interrupting.
Yeah.
if you DM them. So I could not agree with you more. And I think and like anything else in life, you have to work at it. Like your client that you were talking about that posted all those videos. Well, he's getting after it. He wants it. Nothing's going to happen if you don't do it.
Yep.
But if you do that, people will engage, no question.
And it's like I told him, I said, John, this last 30 days isn't going to revolutionize your sales at the cash register. You do it for the next 300, the next 600, the next 900, then it will. Because in my business, as well as the restaurant business, today's sales are from yesterday and last week and last month and last year's impressions. And the two biggest things I see people aren't doing enough of, I've seen more of it since the pandemic, but still not doing enough of it, is number one, leveraging and utilizing these free tools and video. Like they say back in the day, video killed the radio star. Video is killing the regular Facebook post right now, or the tweet. I mean, Twitter, you can put videos on. And the other aspect of it on top of that is that it allows you to show your face. And the one thing I've seen more than any other business is that people love to go into a restaurant and go, yeah, that's Steven back there. He owns the joint. They want to be that. They want to be able to say, Steven, oh, hey, how you doing? This is the digital table touch, is if you get on there, show your face, and that way people can relate to you. And when they come in, talk to you, it's a huge opportunity. And I hope that restaurants continue to take steps forward and continue to quit acting like I have people all the time telling me, I'm too busy. I'm like, dude, I'm as busy as they get. I know you're as busy as they get. I still find time to put out content on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis. Now, granted, I have a team that helps me now, but 5 years ago, it was Matt Plapp and this phone. And now if I go to my Instagram, you can see, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube Shorts. If I look just at a brief thing on my Instagram, just looking back at the last couple of days, this talks about your sales reps. If I look back, probably, 556, 97, 127, 170, 370, 500, 1400, 1500, 500, 5,000, 1800, 1800, 1300. And the one thing a lot of these have in common, though, that I learned, and I had to learn it the hard way, and this is a big element for even salespeople like your team and like restaurants, is 5 years ago, I was always selling. It was how great Matt Plapp is, how great our programs are, how badass we are at helping restaurants, which, by the way, we still are. But I shifted to now it's me interviewing people. It's me telling stories. It's me talking about things. It's not about me. And that's where a lot of restaurants I feel can really improve, is that Mother's Day was a great example last month. How many restaurants put out their Mother's Day brunch, their Mother's Day advertising? How many restaurants got on Facebook Live with their mom and said, hey, Mother's Day's coming up in a couple weeks. This is my mom. Let's talk to our mom. Let's have a conversation. I love her. We did this. Here's some stories. Hey, in the comments below, share a picture and a story of you and your mom. Well, guess what? You don't have to ask them to buy food. If they engage in marketing like that on a consistent basis, they're going to, when Mother's Day brunch comes around, go, let's go to that place for Mother's Day because you're more relevant. And that's a huge opportunity, is to, quit leading with your hand out and lead with your hand putting something somewhere.
100%. And I almost think that if you lead with the handout, this is the wrong medium to do that with, because all you're going to do is you're actually going to create a negative impression. You're going to have the absolute opposite effect. For people that use, this is my philosophy, my approach. You're obviously an expert, but my approach is the following. Just be yourself. Just share information. If you can share value, great, and then just leave it alone. When you want to get transactional purposefully, that's when, and I'm talking about for what I instruct my team to do and what I think restaurants could do. For example, one of the big trends, and this was going on even before, when tourists come to New York now, they're not just going to hang around Times Square. There's all these different channels and YouTube channels. So when people go on vacation, they go, what are the best neighborhoods in New York? What's an authentic New York experience? So when you have tourists coming in, you're not, if you're in a neighborhood that was not in Times Square, that doesn't matter anymore. People are looking to travel. So if you know that your cuisine or your concept does really well in Lisbon or Nice or London, you can reach out to relevant participants in that space to at least just share what you're about. Maybe somebody will see it, or maybe somebody will see it that knows someone's going to New York. Again, this is for business purposes, but you have to be smart about it. You have to be energetic. You have to be consistent. You have to be authentic, right? Have fun with it, but yeah, it can't be salesy. Otherwise, you're just going to turn people off. This is not the medium for that.
Yep. I agree completely. I, I,
100%.
appre- I appreciate your time today, Friday afternoon. You said the podcasts come out on Tuesdays, right?
Yep, we're going to have a podcast out on Tuesday that's going to cover some of the things you and I have discussed, as well as some other trends. And yes, that's correct.
And they can find everything they need about Woolco at woolcofoods.net. And then there's
Yep,
the / podcast where they can find how to listen to it or watch it. Is
sure,
it
sure.
video as well or just audio?
It's just audio, but you can get it wherever you find podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes. Also, if you would like, you can certainly email me at steven@woolcofoods.com, or you can DM me on our Woolco Foods page. I have a lot of people that are doing that now, and I really enjoy it. I love the questions. I love the commentary. I love that type of engagement because I like to learn as well. It's a beautiful thing, and I
And
appreciate that, man.
I love what you put out because you're one of, I want to say 2 or 3 people I know in your industry. Besides, we got the guys at Hillcrest Foods up in Cleveland with Restauranttopia. There's not many restaurant food providers putting content out like this. And, it's awesome to see. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it. And I appreciate being on this Friday afternoon.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. It's always great talking to you.
Thanks, David.
Have a great one.